deep engagement with historical and social themes. His novel Panipat, centered around the Third Battle of Panipat, widely acclaimed, has received numerous prestigious awards, including the Sahitya Akademi Award, Indira Goswami National Literary Award, Nath Madhav Award. He has ventured into cinema, directing the film Rajo in 2013, starring Kanchana Ranaut. Of course, everyone in Odisha knows our moderator, Professor Jatindra Kumar Nayak, a distinguished Indian translator, literary critic, and academic, known for his contribution to Odia literature and print culture. Also, the recipient of the Kalinga Literary Award. So we will start with the session now. But before I invite our dignitaries, volunteers, I'll request, please see there are so many people outside. Can you please request them to come inside? I see so many of them standing outside. Can you please request people to come and take their seats and be inside? ମୁଁ अनुरोध करिबी भितर को प्लीज बाहर आमर जो माने अतिथि अछंती मु भाबुची मोर स्वर आपण मानकु सुभा जाउतबो आपण को विनम्र अनुरोध आपण माने आसी कि भितरे बसंतु सेशंस करा हेछि आपण मानक पय आपण मानकु अनुरोध आपण माने आसी कि सुनंतु तार आनंद नियंतु किछि सिखिबा को मध्य पाइबे आपण ए सेशंस माध्यम रे समस्त को अनुरोध प्लीज सेटल डाउन सो दैट आमे हमर सेशन टी आरंभ करि परिबा. I'll also request at the Indonesia counter, I know there's a lot of excitement there, but we have to start a session. We can do this during the breaks, pictures and everything, but we'll request everybody to please take their seats. This might cause a bit of disturbance to the panelists when they are doing the session. I understand the excitement, and of course, we are all hearts for pictures and excitement, but not when the sessions are on. Please, ladies and gentlemen. All right, volunteers, did you request people who wanted to come in? Have you said that some people are coming in? If so, otherwise we would like to start with a session because we have a lot of sessions planned for the day. I request people, please carry your cup of tea. I know it's morning hour and everybody enjoys a cup of tea, but I request you can please carry your cup of tea and come inside. It's a humble request. I see so many people. Please carry your cup of tea and come inside. We would like to start with the session. Well, we are just about to start the session, and we would like to inform all our panelists and moderators that yes, the audience will be divided because we are having multiple sessions across different halls. So I request people who are in the hall, if you can all come to the front rows. Do not please keep the division like so many people at the back and some people at the front. Maybe all of you can come closer so that those who are there, and it feels good for the for an interaction with the audience as well. It feels good for the panel as well. So I'll request guests who are here for the central theme session, please come forward and take your seats. I've already introduced our panel and we would be starting with the session. Some ground rules, we have to stick to the time. So I'll request all the panelists and moderator to stick to the time because we have a lot of sessions planned during the day. As you can see, it's such a challenge to get people back after a tea break. You can imagine the challenge for a lunch break. So I'll request everyone to please stick to the time. And yes, now let's welcome our panelists and moderator with a big round of applause. Mr. Basant Basnet, Ms. Lily Wangchuk, Ms. Kanchana Priyankantha, Mr. Vishwas Patil, Mr. Michel Baas, along with the moderator, Professor Jatindra Kumar Nayak. A big round of applause as they all join on stage for the central theme, literature and the world, inclusion, identity and belonging. Just to inform everybody, as a ground rule, we have decided to use a bell. 5 minutes before the completion of the session, we would be ringing a bell, which is an indication that you have 5 more minutes to wrap the session so that we can continue all the sessions on time. Thank you so much. I now request Professor Jatindra Kumar Nayak to take this session forward from here. Thank you. Let's have a big round of applause for them. Can we have the cordless mics, please? I request the mics to be kept on the table at all time for all the sessions.
Let me see all of your hands in the air.
Again.
Welcome you all to the first session of the inaugural ceremony. And we have a very fast, what should I say, almost unwieldy topic. So, literature and the world, inclusion, identity, and belonging. So it covers almost all topics under the sun. But I'm sure we have such distinguished panelists that they can deal with it. So they can handle it. So I'll just briefly talk about or share with you my thoughts about the topic. The way I understand it, I think it's obvious that literature reflects the world, literature expresses the world through language, but the problem arises when literature has to deal with identity. Because generally speaking, identity, whenever we are preoccupied with identity, differences arise. That very often identities are defined against other identities. So this is where inclusion and belonging issue get relevance and urgency. When I define my identity, very often historically it has happened that I define it against some other identity. Identity that generally speaking comes to me. That's how I live. For instance, we live in a world where the nation state is extremely, and nation states are very possessive about their idea of belonging, about the culture, about the history. I will give a recent example. For instance, when Soviet Union, Russia invaded Ukraine, suddenly lots of people in Ukraine decided not to read Russian literature. Even great writers like Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Chekhov, they decided that we should read these authors because they belong to a country that has invaded our country. So suddenly, the very idea that literature reflects or communicates shared experience or a shared vision of the world is combated, is challenged. Suddenly, ideas of nation, ideas of identity, these supersede or these precede or these dominate the idea of inclusion.
Wherever you use diversity itself, often makes that you can't read each other's language. You're born good, you're actually a Hindi speaker, it's very unlikely to be able to read each other, right? So, the fact that that field itself has grown into use of pieces is a fascinating aspect of this.
I made a very interesting point. Through translation, literature is becoming more inclusive. There is also something problematic about that. Because everything has to be translated into English before it becomes inclusive. But that's perhaps a situation we have to deal for quite some time before translation can take place between languages and among languages. So now I'll turn to Mr. Basnet. Request you to text very
Thank you very much. Namaskar, everybody. Jai
Translation. If you feel united in the name of music, let me see all of your hands in the air.
Saying these Jagannath or Pashupatinath are non-religious also somehow reflects kind of identity struggle in Nepal also, and in this, like this India, there are many ethnic communities, religious groups, and kind of multiple personal things. Like it's somehow become like salad bowl, and there is high chance to become tensed because there are always threat to how to get perceived to each other, to each other's values, each other's identities. It's always get chance to get complicated also. And from my point of view, since they are saying like there is a conflict between Soviet, Russia and Ukraine, and there is a conflict between there is sometimes it becomes conflict between South Asian continent also. And as I wrote the question, I remember one of my friends who is already there. Said that when it comes to AI, it's not only about politics. We are in our literary organization. We are in our communication unit. But when it comes to Indian infrastructure there, Pakistani always Pakistani very certain countries invite Pakistani translators and Indian translators to left out. So that tension or conflict between the countries are more than 50%. But when it comes to own society, own community, then these days we are facing a kind of ethnic consciousness, which also belongs to identity issue. And when they translate somebody's literary text into cinema or other language, and other community starts say that there is a wrong portrayal of our fiction or our book. And when they characterize something, they like when they tries to they try to depict some
Transmission,
some
are
kind
you
of people like Muslim
feeling?
community or like some ethnic belonging community, and they start to raise the question that is not the real problem of us. So that is the beauty, that is the beauty, and that is the very complex thing also, that I think they always become our asset, and on the other side it becomes our burden. So there is very tricky person that we need to go through, and there is a challenge of every artist, every writer, that he or she has to be politically correct as well as he has to he or she has to write its
Thank you. Basnet, I think you raised a very important point because you paint the scenario, portray a world in which literature is not entirely immune to political conflicts, the borders that divide communities and nationalities. So literature has to militate against all this in order to reach a space where I think true communication can take place among human beings. But it's a challenge. So would you like to reflect on this? How we can transcend stereotypes and create consciousness? Just taking into the sense that
So, if I introduce myself, I would like to introduce myself as an pearl of the Indian Ocean. So, when you hear the pearl of the Indian Ocean, I think most of you know it's Sri Lanka. So, when I introduce myself as Sri Lanka, then I am talking about my identity. Sometimes it's very surprising to see people, especially human beings, always identified in a way. Therefore, it's like just say that I just introduce myself as someone as a human being. I don't think that it is validated in the society to live. Because whether we like it or not, people have been identified through their races, religion, country, nationality, so on. The problem is, yes, we have to accept it. We have to accept that every identity is equally important because it shows that your your culture can be identified through your
Transmission.
identities and your perspectives.
If you feel
There are so many
united
things
in the
that
name of
people
music,
identify
let me
through
see
these
all of your
identities.
hands in the
When
air.
it comes to literature, as Mr. Basant said, that this is identity, team identity is very tricky because sometimes when you identify someone as a, let's say that when it comes to Sri Lanka, we had a war ongoing for 30 years. Then some people have been identified as terrorists. So, but the if we take the Tamil community, they never identified LPT cadres as terrorists. Instead of that, they identified them as their soldiers. So there are conflicts when it comes to identity, and we have to. It is actually as writers, and what I think is that it's very important, critically important to look into those identities and understand those perspectives and include them in the writing. Through them only we can cultivate empathy. Otherwise, because it's equally important to include every person's perspective in literature. Through literature, we can uh, we can empathize and accept the fact everyone has the identity and it has to be accepted, and through that we will learn to accept every person as they are.
I think you have touched upon a very profound issue of literature promotes empathy. Literature enables human beings to negotiate with, engage with the other in ways that perhaps other forms of those knowing human beings can't. But the problem is identities are fluid. The moment we try to solidify it, uh, make identity extremely easy, I think harm is one of the problems. And there is also limit. Whenever we say that literature promotes empathy, there are limits to what we can do. For instance, there is this very famous novel, Outsider, Litreture, by Camus. And everybody talks about is a great existentialist novel and humanist novel and all that. But when the Arabs look at it, they see that Camus hasn't bothered about the person whom Morso killed. So, from an Arab's point of view, outsider doesn't have any empathy. So, there are limits to what literature can do, and we shouldn't idealize or exaggerate the ability of literature to rise above stereotypes. Perhaps very great literature does that, but I think as an anthropologist, I would like think about it and tell us how do we negotiate the visibility of life and the limits to human empathy. Even when our ideal is literature transcends all the world in which empathy is possible. If the author is truly represented without being distorted or demonized.
Yeah, these are quite profound questions. The question of literature and empathy, I think, has occupied the minds of brilliant scholars around the world. Certainly far more brilliant minds than my own. The thing that immediately comes to mind is how literature opens a window to the world. And I often talk about these things with my mother. My mother didn't go to university like I did. Certainly didn't do a PhD, didn't become an anthropologist. But I think in many ways she is sort of an anthropologist in the way she's always immersed herself in literature and used literature as a window to the world. And even though she hasn't traveled that much. She has certainly been to this fabulous city as well, of Bhubaneswar. I took her around, and like so many of us, this is how we get to understand the world beyond our own lives. And just coming back to what I said earlier, what I find such important phrase there now in literature and in the field of India. And I fully agree with your criticism earlier that, now we need English to open the doors up to us. But, coming from the Netherlands, I was born and brought up in the Netherlands, and English is certainly not my native language either. Sometimes you just have to make do with what is official. And one thing we see now in beyond the very strong statement that we saw in the past, people like Priyankantha, but also in the sense from Sri Lanka, where you have a number of phenomenal writers who won this for awards, musicians, Michel, for instance. It's that, so that's what. Also in a colonial phase, even upper middle class upbringing, my own writing as an anthropologist here in India has been a lot about how socioeconomic difference is also connected to language and the one phenomenal thing that it opens up the world to different relations. And I think maybe that being further the agenda of activity today the world, but I certainly still believe that
Transmission.
knowing the world is also
If you feel united in the name of music, let me see all of your hands in the air.
It is for a long time, I think, a highly sentimental view of literature embodying universal values, and these are being increasingly interrogated. For instance, we thought of Premchand as a great writer, writing about common humanity. But now many of his stories are now being interrogated but critiqued by Dalits. When he writes about untouchables, they think that he patronizes them. That may be true of many great writers in different parts of the world who were taken as embodying universal values, but those universal values turn out to be extremely local and extremely narrow, but they are present, like the colonizers presented their values as universal and thought that we must accept them as universal. So this is another problem, that the sentimental view of literature presenting timeless, universal values has been subjected to a lot of pressure. And we have to reckon with that. And whenever we talk about the literature and the world, we should also think about what kind of world literature is reflecting. And this world is not a monolithic world. This is a fragmented world in conflict, the fragments in conflict with each other. So can we talk about that for a bit?
It is exactly a very complex question because when we come to identity issue, many people often talk about religious or ethnic kind of identity, and when she just talked about that political identity, that some people try to objectify a community as a terrorist or what kind of thing. In Nepal also there was a political tension in last decade, but that was already a history. And I want to raise one thing. We just celebrated Nepali author Buddhi Sagar's Youth Literary Award few minutes before. He has written 5 seminal books, and last book is named Eklo. Eklo, that is Nepali name. Eklo is meaning stands for lonely, lonely young people, lonely young person. So literature often deal with individual identity also, individual persons suffering also. But these days many people just raise the value of group identity, means religious identity or communal identity, or a kind of they try to make ghetto, a kind of ghettoized people. But these days, and especially urban people's suffering, urban middle class suffering, and when very marginal community or marginal person goes to city state, and he or she suffers from his or her individual identity issue. But literature is not dealing this kind, and the people are not, especially critics, are not celebrating this kind of identity issue. But we have to deal more about individual suffering and individual identity, in my point of view.
So would you give your view?
I think most of the time people get confused with the two words empathy and sympathy. So most of the time that instead of empathizing with other people, people love to sympathize. It's not that they love; it's how they have been trained and taught. Uh, when it comes to literature, I think literature has a way of uh, stabilizing empathy inside people. The reason is that when simply that if you don't like something happen to you, you shouldn't do that to others. But we have to think about that. uh, does literature that address that issue? As our professor suggested, yes, sometimes empathy has limits. That's how literature portrays things. Empathy shouldn't have any limits. You don't have to sympathize with anyone if you have empathy. But to reach empathy, I think at least you must go through sympathy. Otherwise, you won't be able to reach empathy. That's how I have viewed through literature, because sometimes there are certain times some writers would like to portray certain characters that we can sympathize with them. Especially as you told that when it comes to marginalized societies, marginalized communities, that we don't get to empathize with them. Instead, we are compelled to sympathize. But by sympathizing them, what happens to the community is we feel that we are superior to them. It shouldn't happen. Equality and belongingness must be promoted through empathy. It can be done. There are so many Sri Lankan writers who have done it, and there are so many some writers who haven't amplified the stereotypes. That also happen. So I think it's a responsibility of a writer what that person is doing, because through writing we speak to a larger community. So when we speak to a larger community, it's important that we pay attention how we portray identities, and whether we are doing justice to the characters or to our readers.
I think time is running out, and we might take a few quick questions from the audience, if there is any question. Please.
Namaskar. I am Surna Misra. I have two questions. Anybody from the panel can answer. One is about identity, one is about inclusion. Do you think our relation with Pakistan affected our love for Urdu literature, or our relation with Bangladesh affected our Bengali literature, love for Bengali literature? Second question, inclusion. I feel, as Mr. Bassett has told, movies also can influence and impact that intercultural and interlingual, even like French and all. When you watch a movie, that has much more impact. So can inclusion be more of putting our literary things to movies and make it more inclusive? Thank you.
I think I,
Yeah, I mean that's what it reminds me of. Of course, I'm obviously not from India, so my relationship to both countries is very different. But I can see how it has actually been an important discussion within literature, and how a lot of these works have specifically asked this question. So maybe I can give it back in a sense. That question constantly still permeates a lot of the literature that comes out of India. The question of partition, what it has resulted in. So in many ways, it's an ongoing discussion, I think, from the way I've seen it.
Yeah, I think it's a very interesting question, and my answer is both yes and no. As far as Urdu is concerned, it's extremely popular in certain circles, but in other areas, it's facing an assault. So, Rekhta, millions of people are listening to Sairis and all that, but in educational institutions, it's losing ground. So, the other thing is that it's somehow, after independence, particularly after partition, it got associated with Pakistan in our minds. And everywhere it had to beat a retreat. Before that, it was extremely popular. Premchand wrote in Urdu before he wrote in Hindi. So these languages inhabit a highly problematic world, and they're constantly under pressure. So sometimes you have to negotiate these difficult situations. Like I said, there are always spaces in which these languages flourish. In other spaces, they're always under pressure. So this is a series of negotiations these languages have to, and some languages perish. We are thinking Urdu, but many tribal languages are becoming extinct. So language situation is very fluid, and many factors which affect them. So we have to think in terms of particular situations in which they function. Would you like to say anything? Any other questions? Inclusion, well, I think we include and exclude depending on the circumstances. So there are films which we want to be banned. Yeah.
I just want to add a thing. When it comes to sports or music, there are many things in South Asia that in these days people are excluding each other because of political tension. It's not very positive symptom I am seeing into music or sports. There are many very good Pakistani singer who used to sing in Bollywood, and even players also. Even Indian musicians, when they used to celebrate it in Pakistan and other, they are hating each other. I hope and I want to pray that it should not last longer, because we are the reader who used to read Sadat Hassan Monto's The Dog of Titwal type story, So when people are talking about inclusion, it means many things in one salad bowl, celebrating one other's identity, one other's individual value, one other's everything. But why political things, political ideologies need to get that kind of barrier, and culture or literature or art should follow? That is my question and my kind of worry also.
I'll just add something on a lighter note. Somebody divided Asia into three parts: Hindustan, Pakistan, and Filmistan. So the Filmistan is inclusive, or used to be very inclusive. But even that world is now increasingly subjected to all kinds of pressures. It's no more as inclusive as it used to be. So there also, I think people are now very, very conscious of certain pressures. So it's a fluid situation. You can't say that, well, this is inclusive, that is inclusive. Under circumstances, inclusion can give way to exclusion, and exclusion can give way to greater inclusion. So even sports and films, like he said, were the most inclusive areas of Indian life. But even there, slowly cracks are beginning to appear, and we have to be very worried about that. Any other question? Yeah. Please, last.
Thank you very much. My question is regarding empathy. I like the idea where ma'am said that the empathy begins with sympathy. And in India, we use two words for that. One is sahanubhuti, that is sympathy, and samanubhuti, that is empathy. That means starting to have an experience being together, sahanubhuti, and samanubhuti, like having the same experience like the other. Now, when we are talking about the idea of being an inclusive world, when a writer like you tries to express, do you have any kind of uh, rigidity or a boundary in which you want to express yourself to take the reader to that stage of understanding where he experiences that kind of empathy? Or is it curtailed by the publishers or others so that you stop? No, this must should be the pages of the book and all, and you need to stop here. The same kind of things happen with other forms of literature, like movies or any other form of literature, music also. So, do my question is that do writers in the modern world have the freedom to take the reader to that idea of empathy? That's my question.
Thank God I'm not a writer. He will answer that. Very difficult. A very difficult question. Thank God.
It's really difficult question. But in the beginning, I want to add, yeah, I also use samanubhuti, as you said before. Samanubhuti is the very actual word that would carry the meaning of empathy. But let's try something. Let us try something even actual than samanubhuti. I think many of us are from Hindu Buddhist cultural value. So in Buddhism, yeah, Sri Lanka, in Sri Lanka also there are many Buddhists, and they often come to Nepal. And in Buddhism there is a word, karuna. Karuna, I think karuna also carries the value, and even carries more value than I think samanubhuti. When we see everything as the eye of karuna, I think that will be more even bigger than everything. One thing, and second thing is, I think in our publishing industry, like you mentioned before, like in film or other sectors, I watched an interview of A.R. Rahman, the great A.R. Rahman. He even confessed that in industry, especially corporate industry, people are asking them, "ये ऐसा करो, ऐसा नहीं करो, ये करना चाहिए, ये नहीं करना चाहिए." He become tired listening to them. Okay, because music तो उनका field है ना. That is the field of A.R. Rahman, not that corporate people's. If he or she knows better about music, that is fine. But they don't know anything about music, and they are just directing him to do or not to do so. So that is not okay. I think in literature, I especially know about Nepali literature. There is not that kind of scenario in Nepali literature, by and large. But who knows? The time आ सकता है ना.
So I think we have come to the
Excuse me, I have only one. This is, you are talking in Odisha, okay? This is Bhubaneswar. So let us talk about Odia coastal literature, Odia coastal area literature, or South Chhattisgarhi. I spent a lot of time in the border district, state Chhattisgarh literature. So when you talk about the World Forum, international, I had been to USA every year. You know Bob Dylan, the Nobel laureate, belonged to Minnesota. I stayed in Minneapolis. You see their identity in America. You compare with Naipaul, Caribbean Nobel laureate. He hated Indians. I read a lot of books. In the initial years, he didn't like Indian, literature or stalwarts. So compare Odia, talking in Odisha at Bhubaneswar, the inclusiveness and identity crisis of Western Odisha literature, Kosoli, they call Kosoli, or Santali, tribal literature. Jatindra Nayak is the only person who can throw light.
I'm full of darkness. So I think this is a very tricky subject, but I talked about the difficulty of including and excluding languages. So whenever we are talking about one language, we are already marginalizing another. The history of all languages, all linguistic identity movements is a story of marginalizing other languages. So the moment we promote Odia, then we are marginalizing Kosari, marginalizing a tribal language. We are worried about the future of Odia language. We are not worried about many tribal languages perishing. So this will remain, this will continue to haunt us. And we have to have empathy, like Samanubhuti. Unless we feel for these languages, respect those languages, then we can't claim distinctiveness for our own languages. So this is our problem. Whenever we are promoting one language, we forget that we are promoting it at the expense of another language. There is room for many languages, but we are all victims of it, the tendency towards a depressing monolingualism. That's the tendency that we all have to combat. If our languages will also, if our languages dominate another language, some other language will also dominate our language. So we are worried about Odia losing its identity, but we are not worried about Santali or whole language losing its identity or Kosali losing its identity. So we have to have that Samanubhuti. I think that's very important. Empathy for other languages. And we have sympathy. Sympathy patronizes. Empathy is Samanubhuti. Are two very different emotions. So I think you have to, charity begins at home. If you are worried about English or Hindi dominating Odia, you should also worry about Odia dominating tribal languages and coastal languages. So I think that's the.
That is sorry. That is I beg to differ. That is one side of the story dominating other language. Oxford Dictionary. Every year, 20 odd languages they borrow from other language. Jagannath. That's the Lord Jagannath. Jagannath. This is totally undevoted. Jagannath. I mean, that
You are
Rath Yatra.
talking about an
So
extremely
why
powerful.
you tell that? Sorry, why you
Yeah.
tell that one dominant? No, it's
No,
not
no, no.
dominance.
What I pointed out is that you are talking about an extremely powerful international language like English, which can afford to accommodate, absorb many languages, many words from other languages. Think of a small language. How much can it? So it has to be sympathetic to other languages, empathetic to other languages, and grow. The threat comes from when we rigidify our languages, that we can't accept. That's precisely the point I'm making. I'm not differing from you. We should have observed many words from our neighboring languages, but we became very, very puritanical and said that now Odia sounds like Hindi sound. Durdarshan Hindi, Durdarshan Odia is more difficult than English because we didn't observe languages spoken around us. We are more suspicious of our neighbors than America or England. So I think more empathy is what we need. And I must close this session. Thanks to my excellent panelists, I survived the session. Thank you.
Yeah, an excellent panel and a wonderful discussion. Can we have a big round of applause for them? And I'll request them to stay back as well, because we would like to honor them by presenting them with mementos, a token of appreciation from our side. So I'll request Ms. Prachi Naid, co-founder KLF, and Srimati Madhuchanda Bora to please join on stage and do the honors and present mementos to our wonderful panel. As mentioned earlier, we would continue to stick to the time so that we can complete all our sessions on time during the day. So that humble request continues. But for now, let's celebrate our panel for the central theme. A small token of appreciation from the KLF family. Thank you for that wonderful discussion. And a group photograph. Thank you so much. Well, ladies and gentlemen, without any further delay, we'll quickly move to our next session, very important one, Why Children Matter, from schooling and parenting to